Hello, welcome to meditatorzone.com, positiveguru.com. I'm Craig Kimbrough. As always, glad to have you along on this journey into the world of spirituality, metaphysics, and meditation. This is our weekly session. I had a couple things that really struck me. A lot of times, what I end up talking about are things that strike me. I notice that the things that strike me, or when I talk about what strikes me, usually that will be what people relate to most. I can pick out a subject long ahead of time and whatnot and go to talk on it. It won't nearly touch people the same way as it does when I talk about what seems to have stricken me and been maybe my spiritual thought or my spiritual lesson or whatever for the particular week that's going on. And there's a couple of things that I had on my mind, a couple of things that really caught me. And I was debating as to which one I should talk about. One was about us achieving the impossible. It's like, well, if it's impossible, what's the point of achieving it? But sometimes we are put in situations where we need to achieve what seems to be impossible. And quite often what seems to be impossible may be impossible in our minds, but it's not truly impossible. It may even be impossible to the rest of the world when they think of us and maybe our situation or whatnot, but at the same time, it's not impossible. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is achieving the impossible, because I had situations in my life where I needed to have something happen and it seemed impossible. And quite often those things actually did come into fruition, even though they looked like they couldn't. The other thing I wanted to talk about was a second chance in life. Some people say, well, I had my second chance. But it's never too late for a second chance, even if we felt as though we had a second chance before. And when we think of second chances, usually we think of turning everything completely around, life being totally different when we have this second chance that we're thinking of, speaking of. And years ago, I'd asked this question, is it possible to have a second chance? And I had a whole series of events that happened to tell me that, yes, this is very possible in my world at the time. So I was, ever since then, whenever I think of second chances, I think of all the events that occurred up until this particular time. And the other day, I just so happened to be listening to the radio, and they were talking about second chances. They have commercials, maybe it's whether it's to get out of debt, start over financially, whatever. They're talking about a second chance. And I just heard it in the background. I didn't think anything about it, actually. And then I found myself putting in a CD lesson and listening to it. An old CD lesson I'd done years ago. I didn't even know what the CD lesson was. I just sort of picked one randomly and turned it on. And it was titled, Are You Ready for a Second Chance? And it reminded me of the whole idea of new starts and second chances in life. So, and it also caught me because that's what was being talked about on the radio just a couple seconds before. I was like, man, this is no coincidence. As soon as they said second chance, and I just got finished hearing them say second chance, I'm like, oh man, I'm meant to hear this. So I sat and I listened to it, and it was quite fascinating. And so since both of those things been on my mind, and I was debating, well, which one do I talk about? It just came to me, talk about both, because quite often when we need a second chance, it is seeming impossible. It's seeming as though there's no way that this can happen in my life. This possibility is gone. But that's never the case. I learned that years ago, that it's never too late for a second chance. And the impossible is not impossible. Now, I was in the movies the other day, and I can't remember what the name of the movie was. I don't know if it was Gods and Kings or Gods of Egypt. There we go. Thank you. Gods of Egypt was the movie. And all the critics dogged this movie. I found myself wondering, should I see the movie? I think Roger Ebert, hopefully I got the name right, I think he was the one who did not. And he was saying, well, you can't just jump on a bandwagon with he was saying, us critics, we get on the bandwagon, and once so many of us start to say that something is bad, then we all jump on this is no good bandwagon. We find all these things we shouldn't find in it. But he was applauding him for one, the person who made the movie maker, for doing an original film and spending a big budget on an original film. But it has been doing that great at the box office. But went to see it anyway. And I just had this strong feeling I should see the movie. When I saw it, it was a great movie. It was an adventure movie. And it had to do with Horus, the god Horus. You had all these Greek gods in the movie. The goddess of love, all these different Greek gods and whatnot. And then it also had this mortal. And I forget the mortal's name, but he was thrown into this adventure with Horus. He struck a deal with Horus to bring back his love. And his love had passed on. And Horus told him that he would do it for him if they both did their parts of the deal. So they're in this adventure, and they're fighting Horus's uncle, who killed Horus's father. And Horus's father ran the kingdom. And his brother, who was Horus's uncle, the father's brother, he was terrible towards the people and everything. When Horus's father ran the kingdom flourished. The people were well taken care of. The people loved the kingdom. And this is in the kingdom of the gods and earth. So it was just interesting. And they all had, metaphysical capabilities and otherworldly capabilities. They were all gods in the movie. But what I really found fascinating was this mortal. One, his true love, she told him that Horus would be there to help him on this journey he had. And then she dies, so then he's trusting in Horus, and then Horus tells him, well, yeah, I can help you bring her back. And and Horus tells him this because he so badly wants to get revenge for his uncle killing his father, and he wants to rule the kingdom for the good of the people in the kingdom. So here we are, they're on this adventure, and they're fighting other gods and so forth. But the mortal, and I forget his name, man, what's his Beck? His name was Beck. Beck, he just would not give up for anything. No matter how impossible things looked, he would not give up. And even when they were about to be killed, everything's going down, and every time Beck is coming through, sometimes with the help of Horus and the love goddess and whoever else, and other times on his own. And at one point at the end of the movie, when everything comes to life, so to speak, everything works out in the end. When this is worked out, I think Horus is thanking Beck also, and Beck say, well, you're a god, I'm just a mortal. And he says, no, to me, you're a god too. He says, me, a god? What would I be the god of? Now in the movie, the gods are real tall, and he's like way down here to the gods, as they're walking together and so forth. And so he just even magnifies the fact that he is not a god throughout the whole movie. And he doesn't have any powers, but yet he's fighting and running and jumping and ducking with with the gods and so forth in the battle. But he says, well, what am I the God of? And he looks at him, he says, you be the God of the impossible. Because one, Horace knew that it was impossible for him to bring back Beck's love. But in the end, when Horace's grandfather, the biggest god of them all, when he saw everything that took place, he actually offered Horace one favor, whatever he wanted. And Horace asked to have him to bring back his friend, because Beck had actually passed, and to bring back Beck and to bring back his love. And so, he said, you're the God of the impossible, because all throughout the movie, when everything looked impossible, Beck kept moving forward. It was so powerful to me when I was sitting in the movie theater that at one point I had tears in my eyes. I just couldn't stop crying. It was something else. I was hoping no one was seeing me. As I just tears were just coming out of my eyes. I was just wiping my eyes over and over. And if they saw me, they would have had a hard time understanding how somebody so manly and so strong could be crying, So I didn't want to just mess their minds up. So I didn't want them to see me like that. But it really hit me hard, because there's some things in my life that seem impossible, but yet I have to have them taken care of. Things that are near and dear to my heart, to where it looks like there's no way. I have no idea how it's going to be done. I have ideas. Well, yeah, try this, and yeah, try that, and move in this direction, and move in that direction. But I just don't know. And I was reminded that nothing's impossible. And if you keep moving forward on what you think may work, because that's what Beck was doing. He didn't know for sure. He was somewhat doubtful, but he just knew he just had to keep forging ahead with whatever it looked like it might work. And as he kept moving forward, things would fall into place. Even as he was following a God who was lying to him and tricking him. But in the end, on account of Beck's character, Horace turned around, changed his character. And then Horace still didn't have the capability. But then the larger God came in and took care of it on account of seeing all these things take place. It was incredible. And it just reminded me that the things that are going on that seem like they're impossible to accomplish, I was put in those situations so that I could see that all things are possible with God in the universe. I've had it happen too many times. As I was reminded, as I'm sitting there with tears in my eyes, I'm remembering how the life I have now seems impossible to the person who I was. From where I live, from the way I live, to the things that have happened with my children, especially my older children, because their lives are further along. So I can see how at one time it looked like just it was my one son, when he was in his lower grades in school. There's no way you thought that he'd be graduating college this year. You just would have thought it was impossible. Impossible. I remember going to the school one day, and he was young, and he had gone through some things and whatnot. And I remember going to the school, and in that school I was there because he had hit like so many kids in the class that day, and I remember, and I, and this probably doesn't even go along with the story, but it's still kind of funny. I remember sitting there with the principal, and I remember sitting there with the principal and my son, and the principal saying, Corey, you hit all these different kids, says, first of all, Corey, And he said, well, yeah, they did something that he didn't like. None of them hit him, but they all did something he didn't like. And I remember her saying to him, Corey, what do you do when someone does something to you that you don't like? And I remember distinctly Corey looking and saying, do something back to him. And then not only that, but he looked at me. Right, Dad? And even though I didn't approve of a lot of things Corey was doing, I in my own way, I was trying to teach him to stick up for himself. So he was so proud, like I did something right this time. I did something back to all of them. But he was constantly in trouble, constantly. They were calling me at the school all the time. We had no idea what was going to be done. At one point, I had told the teacher, every time there's a problem, just call me and I'll show up. So I would just show up at the school anytime there was a problem, just to somehow jar what was going on. But I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the teacher he got the following year, or my coming up there over and over again, or just constantly working and working and working with him, because he was a terror in the school for a couple of years. But the teachers, a couple grades ahead, at one point talked to the teachers a couple years back, and the teachers a couple grades forward were hearing about all the problems that he used to cause, and the ones from there were hearing about how wonderful a student he was. They couldn't believe it was the same kid. And he had all types of speech problems where his speech was to the point to where they thought he was talking a different language. And part of the reason was, I guess, his mom was from Vietnam, but he was speaking English, but he just had speech problems at the time. And they were saying, well, we don't know what's going on. Corey's speaking Vietnamese. I said, no, Corey doesn't know Vietnamese. He's not speaking Vietnamese. But there was just so much going on. His life totally turned around to where I'm just so proud and so happy. I'm sure I'd have been proud of him because he's my son no matter what. But it's like night and day. Sometimes when myself and his grandparents talk, we say, who would have ever believed that this is happening now? And he's doing so. This same kid who had all these learning difficulties, now his older sister would talk about him, and she graduated and did very well from U of M, and she would say, well, I have to study, but Corey, he can just take the book and do like this and know the whole book. But that was the same kid that could barely read when other kids were reading. It looked impossible. But, my parents were working with them. I was working with them. It was teaching. Somehow it all came together. I could go on and on with stories about how things looked impossible, totally impossible, and it just got turned around, and it's just amazing. And a lot of times we don't know how it's going to happen. As my teacher used to say, if you take one step, God will take two. And the more you are connected, the more you have your mind on the deeper things in life, the more you have your focus on deeper things in life, the more you take time for meditation and introspection, the more you're getting all the other junk out of the way in your mind, the more God talks to you. You don't even know it's God talking to you. You just think it's an idea. You should go over here. And lo and behold, when you look back, you'll say, that was God. When you look back and say, who would ever thought that could happen? I'm here to say that nothing is impossible. Sometimes I have to be careful. I remember one time we were at dinner. I'm sitting there with my dad and my mom. My stepmoms have a mom and a stepmom, two moms. So I'm sitting there with them and my sister and brother-in-law, and I think it was off of them. I remember my dad. I remember my dad and stepmom, my mom at least. I remember the two of them, and I remember talking with them, and I was saying, "Yes, it's like the first time I made it stop raining." But it happened. I've told the story before. It happened. Now that's something you would think is impossible, but it happened on 3 different occasions. The first time, I'm out working with my gutter and window cleaning company, and it just so happens it's pouring rain, pouring rain. It started, of course, when I started out it was dry, but now it's pouring rain. And I'm saying, man, I would just love to get done with this house. I do, and I'm on the roof. I'm like, whatever. So I said, well, by the time I get to the top, it would really be cool if at the time I got to the top of this, and it's dark and raining. I said, it would really be cool by the time I got to the top of this roof, it just stopped raining. And I'm not thinking anything about it. I'm walking up to the top of the roof, and it may take 15 seconds to get to the top of the roof. I don't know. I walk to the top of the roof, and when I get to the peak of the roof, all of a sudden, it stops raining to where it's just like a drop here, a drop there, almost instant. And then the sun comes shining through. And then steam comes off of the roof. Vapors are coming off of the roof. And I just stand there looking around. I'm like, I don't believe it. I mean, the sun came out. I couldn't believe it. Now, some people say, well, yeah, that's a fluke. One day I was out working with the crew, and it started raining again. And I said, I remember that time it stopped raining. I said, wouldn't that be cool? I said, it would be cool when I got to this mailbox over here, it would just not be raining anymore. And I went walking, and it was pouring that time. But this time when I got to the mailbox, I did like this. Not expecting it to stop raining. It stopped raining. Once again, I couldn't believe it. I've had too many crazy situations happen that seem totally impossible. One time there was a meditation student, and she told a story. And she was talking about how they were in North Carolina riding through the mountains, and it started pouring rain. And she says, "Oh man, this is getting scary." And I don't know if her husband was sleeping, but he was getting his rest, and she was driving. So this doesn't feel good at all. This is getting scary. I don't know what I'm going to do. She said, "Man, I need something to happen like what happened to Craig that time. If when I got around that corner, it would really be nice if it stopped raining, God." And she said she could not believe it. When she got to that corner, it stopped raining. So she just could not believe it. Didn't expect it to happen. I've had that happen too many times with other things where I call it sort of lightly deciding. It'd be so cool if this happened. Not, I'm going to make this happen. Not like that, but just lightly deciding. It'd be really nice if this happened. Sometimes us just opening up our minds to the possibility that it can happen makes a whole series of events come into play. It's a whole quantum physics thing, how when the scientists look with the highly powered microscopes, the atoms appear as they look. They weren't there already. They appear as they look for them. We are creating our worlds though we don't know it. The more we get in tune, the more naturally it happens for our good, for the things that we do want, rather than creating things that we don't want. And we become better able to play with it. And as we walk into situations, reminding ourselves, seeing depictions of, hearing stories of things not being impossible or all things being possible, magic occurs. Now, if you are meditating in addition to this, now you're clearing your mind of all that impossibility. Though you don't realize it, it's happening more and more and more. as you get more proficient at it and able to get your mind off the outside world more, you can even tell it's happening as you're meditating. You can even see scenes going on in your world, and what seemed like being impossible being quite possible in the scenes. Then you have to meditate more to be able to hang on to that possibility after you go out to your waking life in your world. Then you have to be careful of not sharing with people who don't think in this manner and tell you, man, you're tripping. Girl, what are you thinking? But it's real. And then, if you get in your mind, if there's always the possibility of a second chance, for your life to be on this whole totally different track, if you get that in your mind, it's on its way. If you truly get it in your mind that it's possible, and you kind of know what you look like in that second chance, in that other life that is taking place right now. Everything is everywhere, always. Your worst nightmare is taking place in the realm of all possibilities. Your greatest dream is taking place right now in the realm of all possibilities. And though we don't realize that we are in the realm of all possibilities, it's a matter of which one of those are you going to step into. And whichever one of those you're going to step into determines how you live, act, move, and think. Or how you live, act, move, and think helps determine which one of those tracks you're on and where you're going to appear. So, when you start to realize that this other life is possible, you start to develop the ingredients that are needed for that life. You start to develop the resolve and the backbone that is needed for that life. When I got my message years ago about there being always second chances available, not some of the time, available always. When I got that message, and I mean that message came from God, it came so synchronistically. Things fell together so much to tell me that this is your message. I couldn't believe it. And when it happened, I was told there are always new starts and second chances for he or she that chooses resolve over regrets. When you're on the track of the second chance, you choose the resolve. You choose to do the things that are necessary to be in that new life. You choose to be the person that is commensurate with that, whether it be that you eat differently, whether it be that you stand up to people who normally you would cower to, whether it be that you have the guts to do things that you wouldn't, whether it be that you have the wisdom to shut your mouth rather than just running your mouth off so now your enemies can, and enemies, I say quote enemies, because there really are no enemies, but for those who don't understand and will work against you because they don't understand, you have the resolve to know, now's not the time to talk about this. I talk about this at that time. And when you move into the meditative, introspective life, you begin to develop the wisdom to know what is the resolve. What is the move that I should be making? And the more you move into that, the more you're at peace as you make those moves. Things that would before drop you to your knees to have to do. Things that before you could just not say to a particular person. Things before that you worried they'll be looking at me this way if I say that it's this way. things he forged. You said, oh, they won't understand if I tell them that the price is this. So you always give them the lower price, and yet behold, your business is falling apart, and you know why, but you don't have the resolve to do the things that you need to do to make it work right. But when you were going within, you are developing that resolve. You're getting filled with the ojas. My teacher, Mr. Ambrischi, said, those great ones have many ojas. The spiritual substance and vitality that is added when you are replenishing yourself with that by going within. You're being connected with the positive vitality that's within you. And then there's a spirit that knows that all things are possible that comes upon you. There's a spirit that knows and remembers other situations that looked impossible but yet occurred, and that feels it, because you can remember it but not feel it. And if it's not in your life, you look at someone else's life, you say, who would have ever thought that could happen to them? That looked impossible. That can happen to me. You won't just intellectually know it, but you'll feel it. That's why we go within. Is to be connected with that source within us that has the strength, that has the power to focus on those centers that enliven that within us. We have the spirit of all things possible within all of us. We have the spirit of new starts and second chances within all of us. And we truly know these things are real in our heart of hearts. We have to connect with that. We have to take time to watch things on TV that remind us of that. We have to take time to go to see movies that remind us of that. We have to take time to move on hunches that says, hey, I should go over here and see what's waiting for me. Everything is trying to move us in that direction. Are we ready for a second chance? Are we ready to become a God of the impossible? I say unto you that ye are gods. I'm not making that up. That's in the Bible. I forget what verse. But just type it in. Let me tell you what verse it is. Type it in on your computer screen. Supposedly the words of Jesus. And we are. We are made in the image and likeness. As we go within, we tap into that. That's what we need to do. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'm Craig Kimbrough, PositiveGuru.com, MeditativeZone.com. As always, glad to have you along on this journey. I hope you enjoy.